Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've ever found yourself scrolling through your newsfeed and you see one of those really sensational headlines about a horrific crime,
Well, we all see them.
right, and you feel like immediate visceral rush to judgment, we all do it. But today's session is going to challenge you in ways you might not expect.
Yeah, it really is. We are plunging into a story that forces us to confront those exact snap judgments head on.
Because our focus today is the gritty, deeply unsettling, and just incredibly complex narrative woven through the novel, allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson.
And we're looking at a very specific compilation of sources here. It's not a standard book.
No, not at all. It isn't just a straightforward linear narrative told by an omniscient observer. We're dealing with a collage.
A very fragmented collage.
Exactly. Fictional true crime book excerpts, stark interrogation transcripts, magazine articles, and even sworn legal depositions.
Which makes our mission today pretty intense. We have to sift through this fragmented media landscape to unpack the layers of truth, justice, and sheer survival surrounding a teenage girl convicted of a completely unthinkable crime.
We're going to navigate those incredibly murky gray areas between innocence, guilt, and the massive bureaucratic systems that define those terms for the rest of us. So, okay, let's unpack this. We have to start by looking closely at our protagonist.
Mary B. Addison.
Wait, meet Mary.
When we are first introduced to Mary, the initial image is, it's incredibly stark.
Paint that picture for us.
Well, she is a 15-year-old girl, just a month shy of her 16th birthday, actually, and she's living in a group home in Brooklyn.
But she's not just a normal teen in a group home. Her existence is entirely defined by the apparatus of the state.
Absolutely. She wears a state-issued ankle monitor.
And she has this quote about it, right?
Yeah, she notes that it follows her around like the sun. It's a constant physical manifestation of her confinement.
But the detail that truly isolates her, the allegation hanging over every single interaction she has, is the claim that when she was 9 years old, she killed a 3-month-old white infant.
Named Alyssa Richardson.
A 9-year-old girl charged with the death of an infant. I mean, that is the kind of detail that completely short-circuits the human brain.
It defies our basic understanding of childhood innocence.
It really does. And the materials we're looking at do not shy away from how society reacts to an allegation of that magnitude.
No, they lean right into it, like the excerpt we have from that In-Universe book.
Oh, babies killing babies.
Yes. Profiles of preteen and teen murderers by an author named Jane E. Woods.
Woods leans entirely into the bad seed narrative.
She really does. She argues, quite literally, that some children are just born bad, plain and simple.
Just bad from birth, no nuance.
None. She completely dismisses the idea of examining their surroundings, their upbringing, or any potential trauma.
Yeah.
Instead, she labels them sociological phenomena.
She even draws a direct comparison between Mary and Rhoda.
Right, the fictional child murderer from the 1950s classic film The Bad Seed. What's fascinating here is how that specific cultural reference works to completely dehumanize the subject.
Because Rhoda was the picture of perfect innocence, right?
Exactly. In that 1950s film, Rhoda was middle-class perfection, pigtails, polite manners, but she harbored this completely inexplicable, innate evil.
So by invoking that image, Jane E. Woods is doing something very specific.
She is providing the public with an incredibly convenient psychological out.
Right, because if Mary is simply an anomaly of nature, a monster born devoid of humanity, then society is entirely off the hook.
We don't have to examine systemic poverty. We don't have to look at the failures of the social safety net.
Or the reality of fractured family dynamics, or the profound impact of generational trauma.
Exactly. Framing a child as a sociological phenomenon is basically a mechanism for collective denial.
It allows the public to consume a horrific tragedy as entertainment, rather than confronting the societal failures that actually created the environment for that tragedy to occur.
And that framing completely dictates the reality of Mary's daily life. She is forced to navigate a world that has already diagnosed her as a monster.
So how does she respond to that environment?
Absolute unbroken silence. She doesn't speak.
Which is wild for a teenager.
But she knows that in her current living situation, words are liabilities. Any sound she makes could trigger the other girls in the group home or draw the ire of the staff.
She actually compares her existence to a baby fly she discovers in her room.
Right, Herbert.
Herbert the fly. She watches this fly bouncing around, maintaining a strictly low profile. She notes that Herbert doesn't buzz loudly like a horsefly.
He just nibbles on whatever scraps he can find, trying to live a quiet life and avoid being swatted away by a hostile world.
It is a profound observation of biological survival, Mary recognizes that in a predator-rich environment, visibility equals vulnerability.
And we see that philosophy reflected in her physical reality, too. Consider her complete lack of personal possessions,
Yeah, she lives out of a single closet.
containing exactly 3 pairs of jeans, a few shirts, a hoodie, and that ankle monitor.
When an individual is stripped of their personal artifacts like that, they are undergoing a forced erasure of identity.
But Mary doesn't just endure this erasure. She weaponizes it.
How so?
She recalls a defense mechanism she developed during her time in what she calls the crazy house, which we later realize is Bellevue Hospital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She would spend hours staring blankly at dust particles or falling snow, making herself appear stone cold, dead to the world.
Because she learned that if she completely checked out, the doctors and the adults would eventually grow frustrated and just stop asking her questions.
She's literally mimicking death in order to survive.
Which brings us to the actual environment she's trying to survive in. We need to look at the infrastructure of punishment detailed in these sources.
The distinction made between the different tiers of juvenile incarceration is just chilling.
Because Mary spent 6 years of her life in an institution she refers to as baby jail.
Right, before being transferred to this group home in Flatlands, Brooklyn.
And she makes a very clear delineation regarding the offenses that land a child in these places. Normal juvenile detention is for teenagers who rob bodegas, steal cars, commit impulsive acts.
But baby jail, that is reserved for kids who have done way worse.
The timeline there is devastating, from the age of 9 to 15.
Her critical developmental window, the years where a child forms their understanding of trust, autonomy, social connection.
All of it spent entirely behind bars.
She describes taking rushed, 5-minute showers under water pressure that felt like a fire hose, completely isolated because she was the only baby in baby jail.
And then at 15, with zero psychological transitioning or genuine rehabilitation, she's just dumped into the Flatlands group home.
We're looking at a system that relies entirely on containment and warehousing, rather than any attempt at restorative justice or psychological care.
The sensory details used to describe that Flatlands group home paint a picture of profound neglect.
Oh, the smells alone.
Yeah, the place is described as smelling like a mixture of corn chips, roach spray, and bleach. There are dark panel walls that cast a permanent shadow over the interior. Mice and roaches are everywhere.
Mary has a very specific observation about this environment. She states that the house isn't really a home because no place where you actively fear for your life can ever be considered a home.
It is a holding pen. And the staff responsible for managing this holding pen are walking embodiments of institutional failure.
Let's look at the house manager, Miss Stein.
Miss Stein represents a very specific type of bureaucratic cruelty. She's described as limping around with swollen legs, consuming an entire box of Entenmann's crumb-topped donuts every day.
All while simultaneously berating the girls. She screams at Mary over unseen grease on a kitchen counter. She inspects her laundry just to mock her for having holes in her underwear.
There is a glaring juxtaposition between Miss Stein's own physical gluttony and decay and her relentless petty tyranny over girls who possess absolutely nothing.
She doesn't provide guidance. She provides surveillance and humiliation.
Then you have her sister, Miss Reba.
The enforcer.
Right, who functions as the home's muscle, basically. She sits on the couch wearing black wrist guards and a weight belt, despite never lifting anything heavier than her meals.
Mary observes that whenever a physical altercation breaks out among the girls, Mrs. Reba consistently arrives exactly 10 minutes late to break it up.
The security is entirely theatrical.
It is. But the interaction that reveals the most about the system's underlying philosophy is with the social worker, Miss Carmen.
This part broke my heart, because Mary actually harbors a quiet ambition. When asked about her career goals, she writes down teacher.
She remembers setting up her toys and trying to teach the baby, Alyssa, her ABCs.
And Mrs. Carmen's reaction. She chuckles. She immediately shuts down the idea and informs Mary that a convicted baby killer will never be permitted to work with children.
She diverts Mary into cosmetology instead. That interaction strips away any illusion that the system's goal is rehabilitation.
Because a social worker's mandate should theoretically involve nurturing potential, guiding a troubled youth toward a constructive future.
Instead, Miss Carmen functions as an agent of risk management. She views Mary not as a traumatized teenager with obvious intellectual capabilities, but purely as a liability to be managed.
By forcing Mary into a predetermined, low-risk occupational box, the system ensures she remains marginalized.
And this same attitude is mirrored by her parole officer, P.O. Winters.
Oh, Winters is brutal. He enters the home, treats the residents like inventory, looks at Mary, and immediately declares, "You're going to give me problems, Addison, I can tell."
The presumption of guilt and future criminality is baked into every interaction she has with authority.
Mary notes that throughout this entire process, from the age of 9 onward, no adult has ever done her the basic courtesy of explaining why things are happening to her. Her life is governed by the phrase, "because I said so."
And within this vacuum of guidance, the group home operates under its own violent, unpoliced hierarchy. We have to look at the other girls living in this house.
You have Tara, who operates with the mental capacity of a young child, yet she stabbed a boyfriend 10 times with a pen taped to a ruler.
Because she deemed actual knives too dangerous.
Right. Then you have Keisha, who threw a desk at a math teacher and paralyzed her simply for being corrected in class.
There's Kelly, a former cheerleader who ran over 2 girls with a Range Rover because she was angry about a missed practice.
And Marisol, whose entire reality is consumed by a delusional obsession with the R&B singer Trey Songz.
The crimes committed by the other girls serve a very specific narrative purpose here. Their actions are largely impulsive, born of explosive anger or perceived slights.
What we might categorize as violent crimes of passion or emotional dysregulation.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Mary's alleged crime, however, is viewed through an entirely different lens. Even among a population of convicted violent offenders, Mary is ostracized.
The premeditated murder of an infant implies a level of cold, calculated psychosis that terrifies even the other girls. It reinforces her absolute isolation.
We see the terrifying reality of this unchecked environment during the introduction of a new girl named Sarah Young.
This scene is so hard to read. Within mere hours of her arrival, Sarah is falsely accused of using another girl's deodorant.
And the punishment is immediate and brutal. She is dragged by her hair from a top bunk and violently beaten by Kelly while the rest of the house just cheers.
And Mary's reaction? She simply turns back to her Harry Potter book, noting that minding your own business is the only way to avoid getting hurt.
It is a chilling demonstration of how institutionalization destroys empathy and enforces a hyper-vigilant state of self-preservation.
To understand how she ended up in this nightmare, we have to look at the primary source document regarding her arrest. We have the actual interrogation transcript from December 12th, the day the baby died.
We are reading the words of a 9-year-old child being questioned by a detective, Jose.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when you read the dialogue, keeping in mind the age of the suspect, the tactics employed are deeply disturbing.
The psychological power imbalance in that interrogation room is staggering. The detective begins by offering this terrified, exhausted 9-year-old a cheeseburger.
While building rapport is a standard investigative technique, employing it on a child of that age borders on coercion.
He is establishing a dynamic of reliance. Then, he immediately pivots to leading questions. He doesn't ask Mary to describe the events. He presents a pre-constructed narrative.
Right. He states, "Your mommy said you were alone in the room with Alyssa, that she was sleeping in the room with you."
When Mary responds with a confused, "I don't know,"
Mhm.
this detective doesn't recalibrate. He applies more pressure. "You sure? Your mommy said she was crying."
Mary eventually concedes that the baby wouldn't stop crying and it was keeping her awake. The detective then asks if she tried to make the baby stop, to which Mary replies, "I don't remember."
The detective is entirely uninterested in fact-finding. He's utilizing a technique designed to extract a confession from an adult, applying it to a child who lacks the cognitive development to understand the implications of her answers.
He meets her confusion with an assumption of guilt, essentially feeding her the storyline her mother has already provided to the police.
And the external pressure driving this rush to close the case is captured perfectly in the provided excerpt from People magazine. The media coverage is an absolute frenzy.
The article details how an unnamed 9-year-old girl is facing manslaughter charges, but the truly terrifying detail is the public outcry. There was intense, widespread pressure to try this 9-year-old as an adult.
Specifically to pursue the death penalty.
We are talking about a society demanding the state execution of third grader.
The contrast presented in these sources is incredibly damning. On one hand, you have the raw transcript showing a pliable, bewildered child being manipulated by law enforcement.
On the other hand, you have the polished media narrative portraying a calculating monster, stoking a public bloodlust that demands ultimate retribution.
It highlights the profound vulnerability of youth within a legal apparatus designed for adults. Ultimately, the People article notes the legal resolution. Judge Maggie Brenner allowed a plea bargain.
A 9-year-old agreed to a sentence of up to 10 years in an adult state correctional facility, where she was kept in strict isolation due to the sheer volume of death threats she received from the public.
And throughout that entire process, the media notes that Mary never spoke a word in her own defense.
That silence ties directly into the title of the book and the single word that hangs over every piece of evidence we've discussed: allegedly.
The narrative uses that word deliberately and repeatedly.
Mary herself remarks on it, noting that allegedly is the word the system always used to describe her actions.
It functions as a constant, looming reminder to the listener that despite the interrogation, despite the public conviction, and despite the judicial sentencing, the objective truth of what happened in that room with baby Alyssa remains locked entirely within Mary's mind.
The state secured its conviction, but the certainty of her guilt is an illusion.
Which naturally leads us to the most glaring absence in this entire procedural nightmare: her mother.
The People magazine excerpt casually drops a detail that should stop anyone in their tracks. It mentions that Mrs. Cooper Addison willingly stripped off her parental rights, effectively abandoning Mary to the state.
To comprehend the reality of Mary's isolation, we have to conduct a deep psychological autopsy on the woman who raised her and then discarded her.
Dawn Marie Cooper, who later becomes Mrs. Worthington, is arguably the most complex and unsettling figure in this entire deep dive.
We get a glimpse into her history through another fictional true crime excerpt, a book called The Devil Inside by Jude Mitchell.
Dawn's background is saturated in profound, relentless tragedy. She was born in Virginia and forced to drop out of high school at 15 to raise her younger siblings.
She lost an infant brother to sudden infant death syndrome. She managed to become a neonatal nurse, relocated to Brooklyn, married a man 20 years younger than her.
And almost immediately lost him to a drunk driver.
Shortly after that, her sister died from complications related to HIV.
It is a staggering sequence of loss. Dawn is a case study in compounded, untreated generational trauma.
This raises an important question, though. How does that trauma metastasize into her relationship with Mary? Dawn claims she gave birth to Mary at home at the age of 41.
Her official public statement regarding her daughter's birth is chilling. Quote, "It was a cruel and painful birth. I knew something was wrong with her from day one."
She is retroactively weaponizing her own difficult labor to frame her child's entire existence as an inherent affliction. She is laying the psychological groundwork to completely disassociate from her daughter.
And the contrast between that history of devastation and her current presentation is whiplash-inducing. Dawn has completely reinvented herself.
She is now born again. She married Troy Worthington, a wealthy church deacon. She drives a luxury BMW.
When she arrives at the Flatlands group home for her mandatory visits, she doesn't look like the mother of an incarcerated teenager. She looks like she's attending a high society luncheon.
Hot pink skirt suits, matching shoes, elaborate cream-colored church hats, and massive diamond earrings.
But the structure of these visits is entirely performative. She arrives precisely every other Sunday, immediately following church services, and stays for exactly 15 minutes.
And she doesn't engage in a dialogue with Mary. She delivers a monologue at her.
The dynamic here requires us to look at the intersection of religious grandiosity and maternal narcissism.
Dawn uses the tragedy of the baby's death not as a point of sorrow, but as a narrative tool to elevate her own status within her church community.
She publicly proclaims to her congregation, "The devil tried to get to me through my daughter and I wouldn't have it."
She completely absolves herself of any parental responsibility by attributing Mary's alleged actions to a supernatural evil inherited from her deceased father's bloodline.
During the 15-minute visits, Dawn actively ignores the squalor and danger of the group home. Instead, she regales her incarcerated daughter with stories about church picnics, the youth ministry's theater productions, and her new husband's expensive taste in wine.
It is a grotesque display of privilege and deliberate blindness.
The moment that truly encapsulates Dawn's cruelty happens when Mary, who is starved for any genuine connection, quietly asks if she might be able to attend church with her mother someday.
Dawn's reaction is visceral. She physically recoils. She immediately stands up, invents an excuse about needing to pick up dry cleaning, and prepares to leave.
But she doesn't just walk away. She uses scripture as a weapon. She looks at her child and quotes 1 Peter 5:8, warning Mary to be sober and vigilant because her adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour.
It is an incredible manipulation of faith. She is utilizing religious texts to reaffirm her daughter's monstrous status while simultaneously casting herself as the righteous survivor.
Mary has an incredibly astute observation about her mother. She notes that Dawn is addicted to putting on a show, even when there is no audience.
Mary recalls her mother's toxic, unyielding optimism throughout her childhood, smiling while being evicted, smiling after enduring physical abuse from boyfriends.
And most horrifyingly, smiling during Mary's manslaughter sentencing. Dawn actually turned to her 9-year-old daughter, who had just been sentenced to a decade in prison, and said, "See, baby, it's not so bad. At least it's not murder."
This toxic positivity isn't resilience. It is a pathological refusal to engage with reality. Dawn willingly surrendered her child to a predatory system because playing the role of the pious, long-suffering martyr offered her more social currency than actually being a mother.
Understanding that dynamic, that the only source of maternal attention Mary receives is this 15-minute window of conditional, performative narcissism, makes Mary's internal life all the more extraordinary.
Because despite being discarded by her mother and warehoused by the state, the materials reveal that Mary is not just passively waiting out her sentence.
She's engaged in a quiet, meticulous campaign for her own future. And the catalyst for this campaign is found in her community service assignment at the Greenview Nursing Home.
The nursing home provides a fascinating psychological counterpoint to the group home. As part of her parole conditions, Mary works 25 hours a week as a candy striper.
Her description of the facility is grim but highly analytical. She categorizes the building by its 5 floors. The first floor is assisted living, filled with relatively healthy seniors who complain about trivialities.
The second is for the chronically exhausted. The third is hospice care.
The 4th floor she designates as purgatory, where residents are slowly losing their cognitive functions.
And the 5th floor she bluntly labels hell, the dementia ward, where residents seem possessed by entities entirely replacing their former selves.
Yet, in a profound twist, Mary explicitly states she prefers working on the 4th and 5th floors.
She finds comfort there because it represents familiar circumstances.
It makes complete emotional sense when you view it through her lens. In the outside world and in the group home, she is constantly scrutinized, judged, and feared.
But among residents who are losing their grip on reality, who are fading away and forgotten by their own families, she finds an odd sort of sanctuary. They are incapable of judging her for a past they cannot remember.
But Greenview is also the setting where she meets Ted. Ted is another candy striper, also fulfilling a community service requirement from the juvenile system.
He's studying to become an electrician. He's been out of juvie for 6 months for a crime he adamantly maintains he did not commit.
He's described wearing pink scrubs that contrast with his smooth, dark chocolate skin, but his hands tell a different story. His knuckles are heavily scarred, looking as though he spent his entire life punching brick walls.
The introduction of Ted shifts the entire trajectory of the narrative. Ted views Mary not as a sociological phenomenon or a risk to be managed, but as a human being worthy of deep affection.
And he actualizes this affection through a very specific gesture. While they are eating together in the nursing home cafeteria, an environment Mary notes smells distinctively of urine and moldy flesh. Ted presents her with a heavy black plastic bag.
Inside is a copy of a Kaplan SAT Strategies, Practice, and Review book, which has a retail price of $39.95.
We have to contextualize the magnitude of this gift. For teenagers surviving on a state-mandated allowance of $15 a week, $40 is a staggering sum.
When Mary questions how he obtained the money, he deflects, and she recognizes the necessity of not pushing the issue.
She understands the informal economies of the system, and she accepts the book for what it truly is, a tangible lifeline.
The presence of this SAT book brings a massive revelation regarding Mary's character to the forefront. The state has treated her as an uneducable liability.
But the sources include a deposition from a woman named Miss Ellen Rue, who is Mary's 4th grade teacher.
Mrs. Rue's sworn testimony completely contradicts the institutional narrative. She describes Mary not just as smart, but as gifted, calling her one of the most brilliant students she had ever encountered.
She testifies that in the 4th grade, Mary was reading at an 8th grade level, and she recalls Mary completing a complex 6th grade math exam in 30 minutes, scoring a 90%.
That deposition is a damning indictment of the institutional care system. Mary possesses exceptional intelligence, but she has learned to actively suppress it.
She deliberately plays dumb in front of Miss Carmen, the social worker, and Mrs. Stein, the house manager.
We have to ask why a gifted child would weaponize ignorance.
In an infrastructure built entirely around risk management, low expectations, and punishment, visible ambition is dangerous.
If the staff realizes she is highly intelligent, they will subject her to greater scrutiny. They might interpret her intelligence as manipulation or defiance. To survive the system, she must camouflage her brilliance.
But in the privacy of her own mind, she is applying that brilliance to a highly calculated escape plan. She outlines it meticulously in a cosmetology notebook.
She calculates that if she takes exactly half of her $15 weekly allowance, $7.50, and saves it religiously, she will amass $780 in 1 year.
Over the course of 4 years, she will have $3,120 by the time she reaches her first semester of college.
Her objective is to study the 756-page Kaplan book at a rate of 50 pages a week, aiming to score the 98th percentile on the SAT.
Her logic is that an undeniably elite test score will force college admissions boards to overlook a juvenile manslaughter conviction.
Her ultimate goal is to attend business school, open a hardware store alongside Ted, get married, and completely sever ties with her past.
It is an incredibly rational, structurally sound plan devised by a child the world has written off as psychotic.
But the narrative introduces a physiological complication that instantly shatters this long-term timeline.
The back cover blurb of the source novel explicitly states that Mary is fighting not just for herself, but for an unborn child.
And we see the realization of this crisis during that same cafeteria dinner with Ted. He slides an extra carton of milk onto her tray, a quiet gesture of requested nourishment, and softly asks, "Still no period?"
Mary exhales and confirms the reality. She is 10 days late.
While they both attempt to maintain a facade of calm, the psychological stakes have just become existential.
Because if the state discovers she is pregnant while in custody, especially given her conviction history, they will immediately remove the child from her care upon birth.
The luxury of a 4-year plan evaporates. Her quiet, patient strategy must transition into an immediate, desperate battle to establish her autonomy.
That sudden, crushing urgency brings us to the climax of the excerpts we're examining. The scene places us back inside the Flatlands group home.
Mary is lying on her top bunk. She is secretly studying the SAT book, hyper-aware that she must keep her intellectual ambitions hidden from the other girls.
She notes that the mice in the home have already begun nibbling the edges of the pages, a detail that perfectly captures the decay threatening her future.
Suddenly, she is interrupted by Tara, the volatile roommate who operates with a child's mentality but an adult's capacity for violence.
Tara approaches the bunk, demands to know what Mary is doing, and when Mary attempts her usual strategy of silent evasion, Tara violently yanks at the bedsheet.
The heavy Kaplan prep book is dislodged, falling hard and slapping against the wooden floor.
So what does this all mean? The tension in this moment is suffocating.
For Mary, this isn't just a book hitting the floor. It is the physical manifestation of her secret hope being exposed to a hostile environment.
Tara bends down and grabs the book. Mary describes a visceral, physical revulsion and itching sensation at the sight of Tara's greasy hands handling the object Ted sacrificed to give her.
The book represents a future where she is valued, and it is now in the hands of someone who represents the mindless violence of her current reality.
And then Tara, laughing with cruel childlike ignorance, begins to tear the first pages from the book, crumpling them up.
Up until this exact fraction of a second, Mary's entire existence has been defined by the philosophy of Herbert the Fly. Stay small, stay quiet, play dead, and survive.
But watching the literal blueprint of her future being casually shredded by someone who cannot even comprehend its value acts as a catalyst, something inside Mary finally fractures.
But crucially, she doesn't react with the psychopathic violence the public and the media assume she possesses.
Instead, her reaction is verbal. Her tongue, which she describes as feeling detached from the roof of her mouth, finally moves.
For the first time in years, she breaks her self-imposed silence in front of the other girls. She looks directly at Tara and mumbles 3 words. "Give it back."
The atmospheric shift in that room is immediate. The narrative notes that the entire room freezes. Another girl whispers in shock, "Oh, shit!"
None of them have ever heard Mary's voice. They have only ever known her as the silent, terrifying anomaly.
By uttering those 3 words, Mary crosses a psychological Rubicon. She is definitively abandoning her role as a passive observer, a victim merely absorbing the punishment of the state and the abuse of her peers.
She is asserting ownership. She is claiming the book, she is claiming her relationship with Ted, and she is claiming her right to a future. It is a quiet, incredibly tense, moment of ultimate reclamation.
It is a phenomenal point of transition in the narrative and a perfect place to draw our deep dive to a close.
When we look at the totality of these sources, we are forced to confront an incredibly heavy, emotionally dense portrait of the darkest corners of the justice system.
We have examined the catastrophic, cascading failures of every adult and institution tasked with protecting a child. We've seen a legal apparatus that bends to the hysteria of the media,
A social welfare system that actively extinguishes the potential of its wards.
and a mother who weaponizes religion to absolve herself of the ultimate betrayal.
But cutting through all of that institutional decay is the undeniable reality of a young girl's fierce, methodical resilience, a mind that simply refuses to be entirely erased by the world.
Reviewing these documents challenges you to look far beyond the comfort of a sensational headline. It demands that we examine the actual infrastructure of punishment and acknowledge how these systems create the very monsters they claim to protect us from.
When society and the media find it convenient to label a traumatized child a sociological phenomenon, it becomes terrifyingly easy to discard them entirely.
The evidence we've discussed today begs a very uncomfortable question. How many brilliant, capable minds are currently buried within these systems, lost in isolation, simply because society prefers the simplicity of a monster over the complexity of a broken child?
It's a haunting thought.
It really is. Yeah. Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over as you step back into your day. Put yourself in Mary's position. If you found yourself trapped in a world where every adult in a position of power had written you off as fundamentally evil, where the entire architecture of your reality was designed to warehouse you in the dark rather than guide you toward the light, is the simple, quiet act of holding on to hope for a normal future actually the most profound act of defiance possible? Think about that the next time you encounter a story that seems just a little too simple to be true. Keep questioning the narrative and keep diving deep. We'll catch you next time.